Hey, what's going on everybody? Alex here with Freedom Mowers. Hope you guys are having a great one. Today we're going to be jumping into a leaf blower that I got a while back for free that was getting ready to go to the dump. And I don't really know anything about it. We're going to figure it out and see what we can do to fix it. So let's check it out. Alright, and here's what we got on the bench today. Ryobi 200,000 mile an hour blower. I'm not sure the CCs on it. I got this a little while back. Guy was getting ready to throw it to the curb, and figured I'd give it a shot at seeing if I could fix it. I have no idea if it has spark. I do know that the primer bulb is totally rotted off, and also one of the fuel lines is rotted off. Looks to be the supply line to the carburetor because the filter's down in there, and this should be the return, and that's still intact. So that's about all I know on it. So let's get started. I'll get you guys set up on the tripod, and we'll probably just dribble a little bit of fuel down into the cylinder, see if it'll fire up, and if it does, then we'll be moving on to the fuel system. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pop off the spark plug boot here. All right, I've got this little bottle of 2-stroke mix. I'm just gonna put a little down the cylinder. Thank you, Roger McDonald. I really appreciate that. He sent me over that fuel bottle, which has really been helping out. Get this tightened up here. Let's give it a few pulls and see if it'll go. It's just got this spring loaded back, so it's always in the on position. Should probably connect the spark plug back up if I want it to do anything. There we go. All right, should go on this pull, hopefully. Awesome. Well, should be able to just move on to the fuel system at this point. All right, so at this point, I'm just gonna be popping off the air filter cover, see what kind of fasteners we got that's holding on the carburetor. Those look like they're about 10 millimeters, so should just have the two 10 millimeters to take off, and then also I'll go ahead and just disconnect the fuel line. All right, those two lines off. Get these screws, or nuts I should say. This plate should come off, and then we should just be able to slide. I'm gonna have to move the throttle back here just a little bit. All right, just had to make enough slack in the throttle to get that Z-bend off, and now we've got the carburetor off. I'll leave the gasket on there, and we'll take the carburetor over to the bench, take a look at it. All right, well, I am gonna start with the diaphragm side, which is, or the metering valve side, which is here on the bottom. Should just be these 4 screws. I'm gonna take these out, and then I'll show you guys when I lift this plate off. All right, last screw is out. You wanna check to make sure that your diaphragm is pliable. It should almost feel like cloth. This one feels pretty stiff. It's probably still, no, I was gonna say it almost felt like it on the edges that it was soft enough, but you can hear it. It sounds like it's got that crunchy sound to it. So basically this is what's gonna meter your fuel going through the carburetor. So when this gets stiff, it's not gonna work anymore, and it really isn't gonna pump fuel through. So I should have another one of those. I believe Mr. John Clem sent over a metering diaphragm that'll work for this. So I'll leave this alone for the moment, and we'll get the primer bulb side off. Should just be these two screws, and take off the plate because we're gonna have to replace the primer bulb too. All right. Hopefully you guys can see everything here. So this just comes right off, and then you want to check to make sure that your flaps here are not bent upward. They should be sitting relatively flat. These are just your little check valves, and these look okay. Take off the primer bulb. It actually looks fairly clean in here. We have our screen right here, and that's actually what catches any debris. I take that back. I need to take a look because it looks like a piece of cloth or something jammed in there. Let me get a pick and we'll take a look. All right, I've got this little pick here, and wow, I have never seen that before. So it looks like someone jammed a piece of napkin in here. That's not supposed to be inside. Someone's been in this carburetor before. So I'm gonna look in my other carburetors and see if I have a filter. It's just supposed to have a fine mesh screen sitting right here, and see if I have an extra one. All right, well, I went into some of my older carburetors and I have the fine mesh screen to go back in. That was really crazy. I've never seen anything like that. So at this point, basically all I want to do is just kind of spray out some of these ports a little bit. Just get some fluid down in there. Basically, what I'm going to do at this point is I'll get this mesh screen back in. I'll show you guys the metering diaphragm when I get the new one out, and we'll just reassemble and put a new primer bulb in, and we'll move forward with replacing those fuel lines. The screen down in there and everything looks pretty good in the carb. I do have the new diaphragm. This is not exactly the same as the one that came off. So you can see this is the one that came off, and this one only has 3 screw holes, but it'll still work because the outer edge is still going to seal. And the main difference is the tab here on the bottom. You want some of them that you can order, they come with a longer tab, and both of these are the shorter tab ones. It's just this little piece here in the center, but you can see just how pliable this one is, and the other one was just dry and crispy. So we'll go ahead and set the diaphragm in place, and I'll get everything screwed back together. And in the meantime, I've got a new primer bulb too, so we'll put the primer bulb in, and I'll show you guys once the carb's reassembled. All right, well, I got the carburetor back together and wiped it down a little bit. What I did notice is I hooked up a fuel line to the carburetor because I wanted to make sure I think at the beginning of the video I said that the upper line was the one that was the supply, but what I found out when I hooked the fuel line up to the carburetor is that this line was actually the one drawing fuel into the primer bulb and was forcing it back out, which would be your return line. So I think that they had these lines crossed at some point when they hooked them back up. So between the napkin shoved down into the fuel filter area and the backwards fuel lines, we can definitely tell someone's been in this machine. So we'll go ahead and get started on these fuel lines. At this point, all I'm going to do is just take the old line out. I'm going to empty out the contents of what's in the tank here, which that was it. So we've got the tank empty. This is the old fuel filter. This one doesn't look to be in too bad a shape, could reuse that, but I do have some new fuel filters. So we'll go ahead and find some fuel line that's going to match this size, and make sure that it's going to be the right diameter where it's going to create a tight seal on these 2 holes coming out of the plastic tank. and then we can move forward. All right, so you can order these supply of fuel lines on Amazon and get the multi-packs, which is what I have. That way, in case you have a few pieces of equipment that you know you'll probably be changing out the fuel lines on, you can just figure out what line you need for what machine. You just want to make sure that the inner diameter and the outer diameter are the same. The reason for the outer diameter is so that it can create a tight seal on your tank, and the inner diameter you want to be the same. That way it fits on the barbs of the carburetor. So I want to cut a relatively steep angle on the tip and start to feed that into the tank. And once you can get it started, you can get some pliers and pull it the rest of the way through. And I've got that line through and fed back up. This one is going to be the outer one, and when I mount this carburetor back up, this should be our return to the tank side, and I want that one to be on the outside, and then we'll have our line with the fuel filter, our supply line. We'll leave that as our inside. So this one right here will be our vent line back to the tank, and we only want that about an inch or so into the tank, because it's just going to be returning fuel that doesn't make its way into the carburetor when you prime. So we've got that. I'll go ahead and just set the carburetor back up into place for now. That way I can get a measurement. I cut it right about there. And that should be perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and route the other line, bring it out here. I'm going to hook up the fuel filter to it, and then I'll go ahead and connect up the lines, and I'll show you guys after that. All right, well, I got the other line fed through and got the fuel filter on. These lines, you want to just make sure that you've got enough length where your filter is going to be able to go to the far side of the tank, and it can roll back and forth, because these are weighted and they kind of just move around the tank as needed if you're turning the machine. So I'm gonna feed this back in. I'm gonna get the air housing and all that back together, and once I do that, I'm gonna put a little fuel in here and we'll check to make sure this is priming and see if we can start it up. All right, well, I got a little bit of fuel in there, made sure that filter's down at the bottom. Now, hopefully you guys got a good view of everything. We're gonna go ahead and try to prime this up. You can see the fuel's coming up this line. And now we're filling up the primer bulb, and it's returning back to the tank. So we should be good there. All right, guys, well, I was getting everything put back together on it, and I hit it with a little degreaser and brushed it off and wiped it down, and it looks like a pretty good looking unit now. The thing was covered in grease and oil and everything before. So new lines, new primer bulb, new diaphragm, new fuel filter. Let's get it on the floor and let's test it out. All right, well, I gave it a few primes earlier. Give it a few more. We'll put it in the start position and we'll give it a whirl. All right. Click it and then it'll put it in the run position, and we'll see if it'll crank up and stay running. Make sure this off switch works too. Okay, seemed like it wasn't working. All right, guys, well, that is awesome. I'm actually really surprised that I didn't have to do any tuning on this. It sounded really good after it cranked up. I was letting it warm up a little bit, but you know, just quick throttle pulls, it was getting up to speed, and when it was at full speed, it sounded good too. But if we did need to make some adjustments, we would have just adjusted the high or low adjustment screws and just made some tweaks. But everything sounds good, and it seems like the 45 minutes I have into this machine and the fuel system repair, everything seems good. With that napkin inside the carburetor, that's something I've never seen before, and I guess if you guys have any crazy stories, let me know. I'd like to hear maybe some things that you've found in machines, or maybe some not so proper repairs that you've seen, and just let me know. I'd like to hear. I really appreciate you guys checking out the video. I hope you guys have a great one. On that note, let freedom ring, let those small engines sing. I'll see you guys in the next video.